Tia ke, te wehi ki tātua te timatango, te wehi ki tātua te timatango te whakaaro nui, no reira he hono re kuroria ki ai he mau ngā rungo ki rungu te mata te whenua, te whakaaro tau ki a tātou. Te whakaaro tonu ake tātou ki a rātou koe i ngā tū, ngā marama i te tau kua pahura ake nei, tira ki tō tātou rangatira o ngā tū e nuku kopako e tapoto mai nei ki rungu i tōna marae ki a pikirangi. No reira e hone, tēnei anō mātou tō rahinga o tārawa e mihi kau ake ana ki a koe, kia rere pai ai koe ki ngā rangi tū haha. Tira ki ngā tini aitua, ngā mate kai wainganui i a tātou, tēnei anō mātou e poroporo a ki tangihi i a rātou. E ki rātou i para i te huarangi mā tātou, o reira kōtou kua whiturangi hia, haere, haere, ki o ki atu. Nā ko ki mei ki a tātou. Tēnei rā te mihi ake ki a koe te mirita. Nau mai, tatu mai, ki runga ki te takere o te wako o Tārawa, ki ngā pū manawa e waru o Tārawa e mihi kauake nei ki a koe. Tēnei au ka mihi ake ki o maunga, ki o reo, ki o mana, ki tō maunga i rimutaka, ki tō awa te awa kairangi, ki tō taone orongo mai e kia nei ko a pahat, a tēnei au ka mihi ake ki tō rohe, ki tō rahinga, ki tēnā pito o te motune. Nō reira tēnei au e mihi ake ki tō rangatiratanga te tū hei māngai mo te ao mātauranga o Aotearoa. Kia nei, hoia nei te mātauranga, mā te mātauranga ka whiwhi te ao whānui e tātou. Ai ki taua kōrero mā te huruhuru te manu karere, mā te mātauranga tātou ka tū tangata ai ki roto ki tēnei ao whānui. Nō reira ka mihi ake ki tērā tūranga o, otira ki o tūranga ki te State Services Commission, ki ngā aguatanga e herea nei e koe. Reira kāre tēnei te tōro aki i ngā kōrero, engari kia whakatau ai koe ki runga ki a Tārawa, ki roto ki te whare nei o te kaunihera o ngā roto moana o Rotorua. Me tōna whakatauki e whakatau aki nei o tātou. Ko koe, ko wau, ko tātou katoa. Reira, tēnei au ka mihi ake i wera aguatanga, ka mihi ake ki o mana, ki o whakapapa, ki o whātai. Tēnei te mihi ki a koe, otira ki a tātou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā rata katoa.
Minister Hipkins, tēnā tātou katoa wana mihi nui kia koutou, and welcome into our council chamber where the decisions are made for our own communities and for the wider region. And it's wonderful to have you here. As you came in this morning, I know Ezra was bringing you past training for Local Government New Zealand that's going on with the Community Board and elected members. So we really are at the beginning of a new triennial, and we're really thrilled that you've taken your time to come today to share with us as newly elected mayors and chair your aspirations for how central and local government can work together and how the wider government sector can work together through a joined up approach. And that's what we want you to leave today with, the impression that we are working locally with our communities on issues that really matter to us and to our people, putting our people at the centre, but then also where we can work in a more joined up and strategic way together, especially to face the challenges in our region. Our motto, as Arapeta would have said, is Tato Tato, we together. And for us that really matters, that we also have a partnership with government. So our partnership, and each one of us will have different partners at our tables, but is with our community, with iwi, and with government. And that's very much how we conduct our business here. And we are seeing results from having a much more strengthened partnership approach. It's worked well for us here in our community, and we're particularly privileged to have our partnership agreement with Te Tato Aotearoa. But I'm excited and confident about what we can achieve as a region through the strength that we're going to show you today of our ability to work together as a region. And I'd now like to hand over to Ezra, who has a new role, and we congratulate you in your role, Ezra. And Minister, we've also got Helen Wynne here at the table, And I think when Ezra's finished, it would be nice if we went around the table to let you know the strength of who was at this table. So Ezra, I'll hand over to you, but I'd particularly like members here to be able to introduce themselves very quickly too at the end. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be lovely, Ezra. If you start, Helen. Excuse me. Could you, yeah, Doug, and all of you new to the table, if you just press the little button when you introduce yourself, we are ring fenced and we can.
I'll start again.
Yeah, thanks,
Kia ora
Helen.
koutou. I'm Helen Wynne. I lead the Central Local Government Partnerships Group in the Department of Internal Affairs. And as Ezra has just indicated, I'm here on behalf of the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta in her local government portfolio. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Doug Leader, so I chair the Bay of Plenty Regional Council and I actually reside in the Eastern Bay of Plenty.
Kia ora, my name's Fiona McTavish and I'm the CEO of Bay Plenty Regional Council. I'm also the chair of Otamotai Intermediate and a board member at Tauranga Girls College. So it's a privilege to meet you, Minister.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Aileen Laurie, Chief Executive of the Apuriki District Council for the last almost a decade, and prior to that 15 years or so in a couple of regional councils.
Morena, Lynn Riestra, Mayor of Apuriki District, also on the Board of Trustees for Apuriki College.
Kia ora tātou, Marty Grenfell from Tauranga City Council. Originally from the Hutt, so Minister, it's nice to have someone else with Hutt Valley origins in the room, so kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koe, Minister. Tenby Powell, Mayor of Tauranga City.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Manata, tēnā koe, me atu ki a koe. Jeff Williams, I'm Chief Executive for Rotorua Lakes Council.
Kia ora rā tātou, tēnā koe te minita. My name's Arapita Tahana. I'm in the Te Ahure role for Rotorua Lakes Council, essentially facilitating the partnership with iwi and hapu. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Minister. David Trawavis, Mayor of Taupō.
Kia ora, Minister. Gareth Green, Chief Executive Officer of Taupō.
Morning, Minister. Malcolm Campbell from the Centre of the Universe, Kawerau District.
Kia ora, Minister. Russell George, CE at Kawerau District Council.
Kia ora, Minister. Judy Turner, I'm the Mayor of Whakatane.
Kia ora tātou, and tēnā koe te minita. I'm Steph O'Sullivan. I'm the Chief Executive at Whakatane District Council. Welcome.
Kia te mihi kia koutou te hao kāinga. Gary Webber, Mayor of Western Bay District Council, and patiently waiting for a new school for Mokoroa.
Kia ora tātou, Minister. I'm Miriam Terrace, Chief Executive at Western Bay District Council.
Kia ora, Minister. I'm Nick Selwood. I'm the Chief Executive of Lakes DHB.
Morena koutou, Peter Waru, Regional Manager for Oranga Tamariki for the Bay of Plenty Waikato.
Kia ora tātou, Andy McGregor, Police District Commander for Bay of Plenty Waiariki.
Well, kia ora everybody. I guess that comes to me now. Thanks very much for the invitation to come and speak with you, and can I congratulate all of you on your election and re-election where that is applicable. Local government election time is always an interesting time for a central government politician. There's a sense of relief when we see all of your signs going up, that it's you rather than us that's having to deal with that, and then a sense of trepidation when we see them all coming down again and realise that we're next. But it is very good to be able to have this opportunity to come and speak with you. I guess while I am here in my capacity as Minister of State Services primarily, I'm also, of course, the Minister of Education, and I have quite a lot of interaction with local government leaders in that capacity. And when we get into discussion, I am happy to have a conversation about any of those issues that you may wish to raise. I think if I could perhaps sum up areas where there's high population growth, and many of you will be living in those areas with high population growth, the consistent and overwhelming feedback is we need to do more and we need to do it faster when it comes to making sure we've got capacity in our schooling, early childhood education and even tertiary systems to meet the demands of that population growth. So I absolutely hear that feedback, and we're working very hard to try and do that. Primarily, I'm here as Minister of State Services, and I'm not going to give you a long, extended speech in introduction, because I actually think that in a forum like this, it would be a wasted opportunity to do that and then not have an opportunity for interaction and discussion. But if I could just set out for you a little bit about what the government's trying to achieve in this area and some of the key kind of signature reforms that we're undertaking, and where I see local government sitting and fitting into that equation, because I think that the partnership between central and local government, particularly when we're starting to talk about some of the issues, addressing some of the issues that we are, I think is incredibly important to success. So when I became the Minister of State Services, I guess we're starting to form the view you have to forgive me, I'm at the tail end of a cold, it just won't quite go away, that the State Sector Act that has been in place now since 1988 was kind of being tested in terms of what we can do as a public service. The State Sector Act creates very good vertical accountability, but not such good horizontal relationships. And by that I mean, if you're dealing with something that just concerns education, the system works quite well. If you're dealing with something that just involves health, it works quite well. If you're dealing with something, and many of you will do this every day in your local government roles, if you're dealing with issues that cut across different government departments and agencies, actually the system really strains to do that effectively. And we know that because if we look at some of the really big and meaty challenges that we're addressing, child poverty, climate change, and so on, sustainability, those issues cut across government. They don't sit neatly within a nice little silo. And you can't just create a new silo to deal with them either. So you have to actually find a way of joining government together. So I think the system that we've had for the last 30 years has worked quite well insofar as it set out what it was designed to achieve, which was greater accountability for the services that we already deliver. Hasn't really delivered for us when it comes to those bigger challenges. So the reforms of the state sector are really designed to lean into that. And I was hoping this week to introduce the new public service legislation to the House, which will replace the State Sector Act. The lawyers got hold of it, and we've had a little bit of backwards and forwards just in the last few days to tidy up a few loose ends. So I'm hoping now to do that next week, because it's a big and complex piece of legislation. But at its heart, it's designed to formalise some of the conventions that the public service operates under, but also create more opportunities and more tools in the toolkit, I guess, to join up government. And to make sure that we can get, tackle those really big challenges in a way that's a bit more flexible. So you'll see that legislation coming through in the next few weeks, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to discuss that more. But I think legislation's only really part of it, because actually, the culture change that sits underneath it, the way we operate, the change in the way we operate, legislation in itself won't necessarily change that. And when it comes to regional activity, one of the things that we're trying to do as a government is join up central government regional activity in a way that I think will make us a better partner with local government in the medium term. It's sort of, I guess, until I became the Minister of State Services, I didn't really become apparent. I wasn't really conscious of the fact that government structures itself in a way that's incredibly inconsistent when it comes to the regional provision of services, even to the point where how we structure ourselves in this region will be different across different government agencies. And so we're trying to bring a bit more consistency to that so that we can be a better partner with you. And pardon me, that's the role that Ezra is taking on, is to help us draw our central government services and together across the region, so that we can partner better with you and partner better with local communities to do a better job of the delivery of central government services. So I hope that with that you'll see that that's certainly not one of the little bits of murmuring of discontent from the local government sector is that this might be seen as government encroaching on local government space. I certainly don't see it that way at all. I see it as us being a better partner and working with you. And I think that I hope that we can work through any concerns that may exist at that level to allay those. That's probably enough by way of introduction, actually, because I think, as I said, I see this primarily as a good opportunity for us to engage in a little bit of dialogue, seeing as I've got the all-powerful regional leaders here. It would be a wasted opportunity not to do that. So with that, can I throw back to you and open up for some discussion?
I wondered if Helen had something that you wanted to add, Helen, from the Minister's perspective and that central perspective.
Thank you, Steve. We've been watching with a great deal of interest the lead that the State Services Commission and obviously up through ministers and the cabinet, the way in which they're looking at this regionalised approach. The Minister for Local Government is very keen to see a strong collaboration with the Central Local Government Partnerships approach that we're able to support through the Department of Internal Affairs, through her local government portfolio in particular, to lean in very strongly into the approach that is being led, I believe now, out of the Ministry of Social Development, because the Ministry of Social Development has a very big footprint right around New Zealand. So Minister Mahuta has been championing wellbeing initiatives. She's reinstated the 4 wellbeings back into the legislation for local government, really to reinforce what local government's always been doing, but putting it squarely back into the legislation. She's also been very, very interested in the work that the Society of Local Government Managers has been leading on wellbeing indicators. And I think you'll be very interested, if you're not already aware of what they've been doing. They've been working with Statistics New Zealand and a number of other key data agencies to get sub-regional indicators of wellbeing. So they've put together some really innovative material that I think all councils need to avail themselves of, and you can through Solgum, which will help drive your own set of priorities around wellbeing. And then I think, and so Minister Mahuta is really championing that, and she's looking to key people from my team to support councils with that work, to bring into place, really in a very consistent fashion with what Minister Hipkins has just been talking about, a sense of regional but also sub-regional that reflect the needs of all of the different interest groups that exist in our community. So we are particularly, with Minister Mahuta, keen to find a way to get the voice of all of the different segments of your communities, and your voices are going to be different in the different communities that you represent, but to make sure that they can all be expressed so that you really truly do have a very strong sense of your local priorities, the needs of your communities, and that you're also supported. We're looking at ways to ensure that they can be incentivised to be supported to deliver really good outcomes locally. So we're here very strongly to support the mahi of this particular gathering, and we look forward to seeing the progress that you make through the work that occurs here.
Perhaps if I could just add one afterthought before we get into the discussion, and that is one of the things that we're grappling with, which I'm sure you are as well, is the changing nature of the way people want to interact with the state and with the government, and almost certainly with local government as well. I think people's expectations of what's possible and how fast it's possible have certainly changed. And people are now interacting through digital technology with the private sector in a way that's far more connected and joined up than it ever was in the past, and they expect the same level of responsiveness from their public services. And at this point, we deliver that in a pretty patchy kind of a way. And a good example of that is Smart Start, which is something that I've had need to use twice in the last 4 years. When you have when a child is born, you can register the birth, and it connects you up with all of the other aspects of government that need to know about the fact that a child's been born. So in addition to getting the birth certificate, you get the IRD number, but you also get a national health number. You get connected with any changes that might relate to MSD. If there's any welfare entitlements that are involved there, then that's all done automatically. It connects you into the education system and so on. So it's an example of where a frontline service is actually connecting up the parts of government. And I think there's probably more room for us to be partnering with local government around some of those types of frontline service delivery where there's an interaction between central and local government to provide things that are more joined up and more timely and responsive, because That's certainly what people expect now, and I think we're all probably struggling to deliver that.
Thank you for that. And just a comment, that would be a wonderful link into our own local databases so that we can react with putting the ratepayer also at the centre of that informatics. But the other issue, Helen, if I could just mention, on our local government manifesto, we talk about localism, and that really does matter to us. We've all bought into that as a strategic direction. And when we hear the word sub-region, it doesn't reflect the sense of local pride and what we're doing for working with our own communities and setting our priorities. It's only the language, but that really matters to us, leading our communities and place shaping with our communities at the centre. So it's just that language, but also for us to consider, probably after the minister's gone, that dashboard could be something that is a reporting back to either our local councils and then lifted to a regional level at the Triennial. So that's something that we will consider how that could be incorporated into the fabric of our decision making.
I agree with you, Steve, that the language does matter, and so I apologise if I've used a phrase that rankles a little bit. Rest assured, Minister Mahuta really understands the importance of local decision making and local democracy and leadership as well. So she is very much in support, not necessarily with the localism model that LGNZ might be putting forward, but very much she's very clear on the importance of local decision making for local communities.
Thanks, Helen. And it might be good now, I know the chief executives have been meeting, so, you know, while elections come and go, their mahi continues, but we did ask them before the triennial, at the last triennial before the election, to look at how they could align themselves. And so I'd love Jeff to give a bit of a context there of the work that you've all undertaken.
Thank you, Steve. Minister and Helen, if I can just firstly acknowledge the comments that you've made so far, and to just provide a little bit of background to the work that we've been doing. I think it's fair to say that Bay of Plenty has got a long history of collaboration and effective collaboration. But at the same time, we're also recognising that the challenges that our communities are facing today seemingly are increasing. So we are seeing our social issues such as poverty, domestic violence, crime become significant. At the same time, we're seeing a level of homelessness present that we've never seen before in New Zealand. And so we can see that whilst we've been very successful, the challenges are somewhat ramping up within our communities. And so as a sector, we've recognised that there needs to fundamentally be a different approach, a different set of solutions being able to be put on the table. Those discussions have led us down to a recognition that the only people that really understand the structures of government are people in government. And in fact, our communities don't recognise the way that we organise ourselves, nor where our responsibilities start and finish. They expect us, in fact, to be working with them to propose solutions for their fundamental challenges. That's what their core expectation is. So within the Bay of Plenty, with Ezra's new role with the group that Andy leads, we've been talking about how do we organise ourselves, what do we do in a different way from what we've actually done in the past. And so we've alighted on this, which is a first meeting, and our view is that we will work following this meeting to collectively together to look at, let's capture what our region looks like. Let's understand some of those challenges more fundamentally, and we will, at the next triennial meeting, present that material back to the mayors and the chair for their consideration. And a discussion about where are the priorities, what are the priorities for this region. At a more local level, we're also developing more local versions of this type of collaboration and acknowledge the central government leads in the table, because around each of our parts of our region, we have got these levels of collaboration happening and discussions about what are our priorities. Here in Rotorua, we are focusing particularly on housing at the moment. And we recognise that with government's focus on some of the social issues that exist in our community, ultimately the answer lies with not just housing so much, but actually reshaping, rediscovering and reconnecting communities which are successful, they're joined up and they're supported by all of government. And that's our priority at a local level. And perhaps if Andy, if I can pass back to you, as I know that you've been leading the local collective impact group, which has actually had some strong successes in the same area as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Kia ora tātou. Minister, can I just acknowledge you and thanks very much for being here to the Mural Forum. It's great to be here. I know I've worked with many of you on a one-to-one basis or had talks and things like that, but I think it's a sign of things to come in terms of the direction we're heading, where we've actually got a meeting like this with central and local regional government leaders. So it's great. To Helen and Kay, great to have you here too, supporting our work. I just want to sort of talk briefly about the genesis, where we started, because obviously it was back in about 2015 when a group of like-minded central government leaders got together and said, hey, we've got to work better, we've got to collaborate together and actually try and achieve some better outcomes for the community. How can we do that? So we actually had a number of hui with iwi and asked them, actually, what is it you want us to focus on? And the resounding voice coming back was family violence. And I always remember Sir Toby Curtis saying, and he said, nothing is ever going to change unless we rid our homes of the violence. Nothing's ever going to change unless we rid our homes of the violence. So as a group of government leaders, we said, how are we going to galvanise our agencies together to support this kaupapa? And we actually said it's bigger than family violence, it's family harm. And so that was actually the one focus, was the family harm. And the family harm is just not about the violence. It's about actually the harm of actually people not connected to health services, our high-risk pregnant mothers, our moku, who actually don't even have basic health services, not connected to them, around our tamariki and rangatahi, not engaging in education, around people not living in warm homes, around people not in employment, around our offenders when they get out of prison actually not safely reconnecting with their whānau. So we said, we've got to do something different. So with our focus around family harm, we set up some local governance groups in all of your areas. And the resounding as well within all of your areas was family harm was a major issue, and Jeff's already sort of said that. So we tried some new things. And the big benefit was all the agencies talking together. So we're sharing information and we're doing things together. We're tasking as a group, and we're tasking community organisations as well, and it's starting to make a difference. I suppose the big difference is we've employed 2 paiarahi, and this is sort of a good example. It's a good news story. So these are navigators that go to the families. So this isn't me or you, because the families won't connect. These people are engaging with these families where we couldn't even engage, let alone talk to them. They wouldn't come forward. And I've just got a little story here I just want to read. It's an email. It's a bit of a testimony. Sorry, Steve, you've heard this before, but it's a good story. My name is Jason, and I'm a 40-year-old male. I jumped into the family harm workshop being run at Marae last month because my probation officer suggested it. At first I thought this is just another program, just like the others, until Chrissy and her 2 program participants got up to have a korero. What really got me was listening to the 2 bros who were speaking with Chrissy and hearing how much the paiarahi are helping them make changes to improve their lives. Hearing them made me think maybe the Pārahi can help me also. We had a lunch break after that. I came back and had a one-on-one chat with Chrissy. I opened up to her because I knew I needed to change. I signed up there and then for the program. By the end of the day, I had an appointment set down for the next intake at Rotorua, Aroha, for the Tani Takatu Aki program. So that's men standing together. This started last week and I'm just overwhelmed. I can't explain my buzz. I've been on since being on that course. I've also done a planning program with Pārahi since the workshop and have had a good korero around my offending, which is something I knew I had to do. Employment was also identified in my plan, and the Pārahi have advocated for me regarding this. I'm now booked in for my forklift licence later this month, and this will be a step towards my goal set. A further goal set through these programs is not to reoffend again. I'm over it at my age. I should be taking care of my mokapunas and leading them in the right direction. Now, this is a person who's been on the slippery slope for probably 30 years of his 40 years of life. We try and keep him on the rails, but he actually, every now and then they might slip off, but we get them back on again. That's the kind of stuff we're doing. This is around Mariah-based programs, and we've got many other programs actually like that in terms of addiction service, meth education. It's a great way of doing things. So I just want to say to you all, leading the group of central government leaders within the Bay, we definitely have been working with a lot of you and your staff. We want that to continue. And it's really, I suppose, you are the voice of your communities. You know the priorities of your communities, and we want to work with you to actually support communities achieving their aspirations and improving their well-being. If I can just leave you with what Sir Toby said, we're not going to achieve anything until we rid our homes of the violence. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you, Andy. And I think that's a classic story, really, of saying, Minister, we're not asking government to find the solutions. We want to have a partnership approach with you through our agencies so that we're empowered to get on with sorting out the issues that we see that really are impacting on our community. And that's one that's very prevalent, I think, to us all in the region. Right, Mayor Rastra.
I'd like to pick up on a comment from Helen, if I may, around the getting the right information together and having the sub-regional indicators of well-being and so on. One of the things I picked up in our election booklet was that the District Health Board was basing its budget and distribution of its funding on a model that suggested that everywhere in the Bay of Plenty, population was going down. I know from the Eastern Bay of Plenty that each of our districts have gone up 9, 10 and 12% in our population over the last 3 years. I also am pretty aware that most of the other places have gone up in their population as well. So for a District Health Board to be assuming that there are less of us is actually the wrong premise right from the start. As well, alongside that, particularly in our Eastern Bay areas, was a very poor census take. And I know that has tried to be remedied, but if we are to have any good information at all from our region, the collection of it needs to be going across this, not just siloed as well. It needs to go across the lot. And I am very aware that our health budgets are based on the census information that is put forward. So not only are they expecting us to go down in population, they are also have not got the right information as to how many of us are there in the first place. So my big ask is that just the right questions are asked in the right places, and that we don't assume that the central government collection of data is actually 100% correct.
So, Lynn, that's your question. Probably answered from the but not your.
Yeah.
Right. About if we're trying to develop a system, still being indicated, it's got to be based.
Through you, Steve. Well, certainly the data and the DHB's volumes are predicated on the census data you quite rightly mentioned, and I don't think Rotorua and the Lakes region is any different from Eastern Bay. We also had huge difficulty in the latest census around people actually putting data in. The funding that comes to each of the DHBs is based on that. So whatever data is in the system and any predictions forward, the funding is allocated on that basis, and that potentially is why Bay of Plenty is making those comments. Having said that, the DHB is service of last resort, and we do provide services whether we get funded for it or not, as you can see from some of the deficits that sit within DHBs.
That's if we are doing joined up initiatives, we've got to know our baseline, we've got to verify the baseline with you, and then we've got to say how are we going to impact, and that's that collective impact. So that's the territory that we're getting into, because you've also got high health needs, every one of us in this region. But that'll be a focus. If we're looking at family harm, you know, how's the mental health service provision in our district?
If I could perhaps add a little bit to that. Look, the use and misuse of data across government is an area of considerable interest to the government. In a different hat, you know, as Minister of Education, I also rely a lot on data for population, you know, particularly population-based data, for things like where is the population growth, what schools are we going to need, what's our capacity to do that, what schools aren't we going to need, and that's always a very, you know, hotly contested area, as well as I think Trevor Mallard would absolutely attest to. I mean, he was confronted at that point with a set of population projections that suggested in large parts of the country we were going to have far too many schools, and some of that, in hindsight, has not turned out to be true. And so I think that's, you know, and in some cases we've now got rapid population growth that we're struggling to keep up with. And so I think that, you know, data is incredibly important, and I think we can do a better job at a central government level of kind of partnering with local government around intelligence and insights, because you actually do have a lot of insight into what's happening in your local communities that we probably don't draw on enough. I think, this isn't really my ministerial area, but it's an area that I've been paying close attention to. Central government is looking closely at, you know, how can we better use the data and the insight that we have across government now. And, you know, census, which is done every 4 or 5 years, that gives you a bit of a snapshot, but it's not as regular or as reliable as we might need. And so we do have a lot of administrative data that actually, if we start to connect it up in the right way, gives us faster, more rapid insights. And the last government made a decision around the census, as well as going digital with it, which of course we all know has created some interesting challenges. They made a decision to start connecting the census with more of that administrative data to fill in the blanks, if you like, for what you don't get out of the census. And as a result of the problems that have happened with the census, some of that work, which was not sort of scheduled to kick in until the next census, has had to basically be brought forward to match up with this census to fill in the blanks. And the stats have had that kind of independently reviewed, and the work they've been doing, they're independently reviewed by other statisticians, from offshore. And what they've come back to us and said is, look, while the census might not have given us what we need, by matching that administrative data with it, we've been able to fill in the blanks. And so whilst I do understand that people have concerns around the census, I think you can have some reassurance that Stats have worked very hard to make sure that that's not going to create a legacy problem, with having bad data to rely on for decision making. So I think we have got better information now, and they haven't fully released all of that information from the census yet, but I think once they do, we will have a better basis for decision making around health and education and the provision of other social services than we do at the moment. We are still working on some quite outdated and data projections based on the last census, and until we get that current census completed and analysed, and with the new data added to it, we're still a little bit behind.
Thank you. And Judy, you had a question, or?
Yes, thank you, Minister. I guess I just want to further acknowledge Ezra and Helen and Kay for the amazing bits and pieces they've been doing in our space. And I guess if I have a concern, I know you always want a job well done, you ask a busy person. But just that they are, often these responsibilities are added to very big workloads that they already have, and some of them are very important issues that, so we're thrilled with their contribution, but just aware that we're constantly calling on and relying on people whose workloads are pretty significant, and yet what they're doing is very significant as well. So just kind of a heads up that we're pleased with what we're getting, but concerned that it's sustainable.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. One of the things, of course, that we're trying to do by connecting government up a bit more, connecting central government up a bit more at a regional level, is, I guess, reduce some of the workload as well, because it's that you get a bit of a catch-22. Sometimes you feel like you're chasing your tail all of the time if you're not, collaborating as well as you might. So the workload, I guess, has been spread in terms of those regional leads. So if you look at the work that the State Services Commission is doing, and MSD are kind of playing a coordinating role here, it has been spread across different agencies. So Ezra's prime day job, I guess, if you like, is the Ministry of Education. In other areas, I think we've got corrections are taking a lead, MSD, there are different government agencies or rangatamariki taking leads in different parts of the country to kind of spread some of that workload out. But it's a leadership role, it's a coordinating role. Government departments and agencies are still responsible for their own bit of the equation, but it's really about getting them together into the room from time to time to make sure that what they're doing is joining up in the way that it needs to be.
Possibility, Minister, with Ezra's role, and he's just beginning, I know, but we're pretty excited about some of the things we can do, that data's disaggregated and in silos itself, so not necessarily helpful if we take the child that comes into hospital all the time with repeat bronchiolitis and upper chest infections and clutters the wards up in winter. And then when we really look at it, actually they're in homes that are damp, very poor standard, and also there's violence that Andy's mentioned. But, he's reporting on family violence, DHB's reporting on repeat admissions, but actually we're not joining up and going to the root cause of where, if we did a local project, we could make the greatest difference. And that's where I'd love to work with Ezra's sort of expertise that you get from the public sector about, if this is our project, we want to put a case to you, and we might need some coordination to make that happen.
I'll get Ezra to comment on that as well, but I guess it's a sort of a frequent minister's lament, particularly those of us who work in the social portfolios, as you'll recall, is that things come across your desk at the point where they're already far too late. And when and we're talking about individual cases here, and when you actually get into the individual case, a lot of people knew a lot about it, but it just never kind of all got joined together to do something about it. And I think that that's something that you'll find, there wouldn't be a single minister that sits around the cabinet table that doesn't find that incredibly frustrating. And so that's part of the drive for change here. It's about saying we actually know an awful lot about where problems are occurring, but we don't necessarily use that insight in a way that can actually help to solve it. As Minister of Education, I see the unsupported kids, and when I say unsupported, I don't necessarily mean it's unsupported by their parents. I mean just the system's not supporting them in the way that they need, coming through into the schools, and the massive impact that that has on our schooling system. And often we have the power to do something about it if we just pulled the right levers. And that's difficult. Citizens' expectations around privacy have changed. And that's something that I think we're all kind of getting our heads around and coming to terms with. So once upon a time, if you gave your information to one government agency or department, you would have an expectation that it wouldn't be shared with anybody else. Now, actually, the general kind of citizen expectation is the opposite of that. They get incredibly frustrated that they have to retell their stories a million different times when they're dealing with different government departments and agencies. So I think we still have to be mindful of the privacy issues and make sure we've got the right protocols in place. But actually, I think people's expectations are quite different now to what they previously were. Ezra.
Thank you, Minister. It's always slightly unnerving when people ask you what you're supposed to be doing, and then you've got your big boss sitting next to you. So I've just got to make sure I get this right. Firstly, can I acknowledge all the fabulous work that all the organisations and councils do? And I think one of the key things about this role, as the Minister said, and I do have Roy and Te Rā here, leads in other regions as well, and hopefully they'll agree with me, I'm sure they will, is that part of this role is about how do we convene, bring together the right people in the room to talk about the things that I think we all understand and know. And so I just really want to pick up on what Andy is saying. There are 4 priorities that we have as our Bay Plenty Collective Impact Group. I think we all know them. And I would imagine, Helen, they'll probably be the same as local government and what our communities, iwi and hapu and mana whenua, are saying. If I could put a different spin on it, one is about how do we engage early? Because all of these things touch on all of us. How do we engage early? And all the evidence, common sense, and our heart tells us, if we engage early in the lives of children and young people in whānau, more likely they are to be successful. That isn't just an education or health situation, that involves all of us together. That's our first priority, and I'm really encouraged by some of the work that Karen and Nick are doing around the DHB and partnering up with education. Secondly is how do we have thriving whānau? Now that's a different spin on family harm and family violence. How do we have whānau that are thriving? No, and we know we make a difference when we can walk in any home, and the story that Andy read is a classic example of that. So thriving whānau, that's another goal that I believe that we all have together. Third, it's about how do we have strong rangatahi? Because our evidence tells us that our young people are disengaging early, not just from schools, but from education. And alarmingly, a number of young females are engaging earlier from education, and it's getting younger. So how do we engage them in a way that's meaningful so we can make a big difference? And again, that isn't just an issue for many of the boards around the table, school boards. That's not an education issue, that's a community issue. So how do we tackle these things together? And fourth, it's about how do we build strong communities. That touches on Jeff's point about housing. How do we have housing that's appropriate, that's warm? I walked into one of our local schools here and they said, Ezra, the biggest issue we have around attendance is in winter, they just do not come to school. So how do we have a warm home? And so those four big areas, those 4 priorities, and led by the leadership of Andy and others around the table, those are the 4 things that we're really focused on. But as you could hear, those are 4 things that I believe that we as a regional group all care deeply about and we can be really involved in, because they touch the lives of all of our citizens right across the Bay as well. So part of why I see this role is, and I call it deliberate cohesion. It's about how then we can understand, bring together those priorities in the social sector. So part of my role is how do I convene, bring together our leaders to determine what are the priorities from the social sector, health, education, oranga tamariki, police and so forth, but also I do want to acknowledge the work that iwi and hapu do in this space as well, because it is significant. And the work that MSD and others are leading, I know Mike isn't here, but Dominic's here from MSD, and the Rotorua working together. There's some good mahi there happening, so how can we bring that together as well? So it's about how can we deliberately get that deliberate cohesion. So it's about bringing together the social sector, but this is key. Then how do we inform the skills sector? And notice here, I say skills, not just education, because education happens not just in schools and centres, but happens in our marae, happens right across our communities as well. So we need a really strong, connected social sector to inform the skills sector, because we need those young people engaging in employment. And there's some fantastic economic development, and the work that Jocelyn and Kay are doing around the MB and the Provincial Growth Fund is a good example of that. But in order for that to happen, we need a good, strong, steady stream of young people ready for work, ready for employment. It's only then we can then use that, how do we inform the school sector, then to drive the economic sector, because that's how we have thriving communities. So it's about the social sector standing up, understanding what our priorities are, so our communities are thriving, to inform the skill sector, so we can understand what the needs are, and really encouraged by the Minister recently announcing the Skills Leadership Group across the 15 regions as well, and that's going to be a critical part of that. But then how does that then drive the economy and drive the economic sector? So the work that our other agencies and you are doing in your communities is really, really important as well. And so part of my role is in, like all of you, is what are the 3 or 4 things that we as a region really care deeply about that we're going to make a difference of? And why don't we have a vision like, could we be, Bay-Plenty be the best place to be a child? Because if that's a starting point, then that we can move from there as well. The last, hopefully, Minister, I've described that's what the role is. Probably the other point I just really want to touch on, Steve, is around the data. And I think one of the things that we do know is that sometimes that can be quite liberating, but also it can be quite paralysing, because we can overthink actually what the issues are, and there's probably enough evidence and data that tells us this. I've been really encouraged, though, that some of the work that we've been involved in as public service leads at the moment is a number of different agencies, actually, MSD, led by MSD, together with education and others as well, as putting together the regional profiles, not only just for us as a region, but then how do we cut it down into our different TLAs? Because if you aggregate the data, you do run the risk of not acknowledging the flavour and uniqueness of various TLAs, because they are quite different and quite unique. And so some of that mahi is really important as well. And I think the opportunity to have live information that we can feed into, that then can inform our citizens about making really good decisions, is going to be really important. So I've seen a prototype of what some of that data looks like, and the thing that I think really gives me a lot of encouragement looking at it is also looking at data from a wellbeing point of view. And so what does wellbeing look like for us as a region? What does it look like for David and Taupo? What does it look like for others in other parts of the region as well? It's going to be really important. So I think hopefully I've tried to bring together how we see the role. It's about how do we bring together those core priorities? How do we then bring together getting that cohesion between the social, skills and the economic sector together? And it's quite an exciting time. And I do, again, just want to acknowledge the opportunity for us to come together like this as central government leaders as well. And I think the leadership of Jeff and the other CEs around the table is going to be quite critical going forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ezra. And I think that reflects exactly the work that we're seeing from the working together of chief executives, and then the information that we'll be provided with as mayors and chair, and then for us to make our decisions at a local level of what we want to tackle. And it's great to hear you really saying, in principle, you support Pūtaki Nui, because that's about a project that we led working together about our young kids. And actually that took 2 years, but it was organic, it was led locally, and it involved iwi. And that's very, very critical for us. So when we believe in something that will deliver for our young people, we've got to have the support of agencies that are all here today, and that will then help us with the family violence. So I think the message for us, Minister, is we'll work. We're thrilled that the Wellbeings are back in the Local Government Act. Not all councillors will be thrilled about that. They've got elected on varied platforms, but we care as mayors in our region about the well-being of our people, and we are thrilled that you came to us first. It's fantastic, and we wanted you to see very strongly that we have a lot of passion and we're well supported by the leaders that are here today, and also the voluntary sector and the NGO sector and iwi and hapu. So watch what comes out of this region, and you may have some closing remarks, Minister.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to make one final contribution, and I think it's reflected in a number of the contributions we've already had. I'm a believer in the principle of subsidiarity, which is something that I think a lot of people in local government, if they're familiar with it, will warmly embrace, and which is that decisions should be made as close as possible to the people who are affected by them. And so I think that creates some interesting questions about the way we structure our government and our social service provision. But the issue here is, I think when people discuss subsidiarity, for those who are familiar with the term, it's often discussed in an either-or term when it comes to central and local government. In reality, I think if we're going to really live up to that principle of make decisions as close as possible to the people who are affected by them, we have to work together on that. It can't be an either-or between central and local government. We've actually got to connect up what we're doing in a way that's much more effective than it is now. So, I think that the partnership between central and local government, it's a good one, but it could be a lot better. And I think that what we're discussing today really is a sign that there's a willingness on both sides to really expand and grow it. And I take real heart from that, because I think that we'll get a much better outcome for New Zealanders, for the people we all are here to serve, if we do that well. So, thank you.
We were going to have lunch, but Gary, you want?
I didn't want to have the closing remarks, though. I understand the multifunctional thing and applaud you. However, the disconnect, as I see it, between central government and local government is our planning cycles. We have stipulated by you wonderful people in Wellington, we have to have a 10-year plan, a 30-year future development strategy, and a 30-year asset management plan, and we are legally bound to do that. I haven't been in local government long enough, but I've seen well-beings in, well-beings out, well-beings back in again. I was encouraged by the budget statement by Grant Robertson that you're looking at a 30-year strategy approach to align, because one of the things that we're talking about, these are intergenerational changes, and until we align our planning cycles at the central government and local government level, we're going to have this mismatch. And what people are talking about in these areas is certainty, not absolute certainty, but a pretty good idea that, as you made the comment before, we've caught the right wind. We know we need to head south, whether it's 10 degrees left or 10 degrees right, but we need to go south. Do you see that's going to come through in the 30-year alignment of our planning cycles?
Absolutely, and I think particularly when it comes to central government capital expenditure around infrastructure and so on, we have to really shift our thinking. We're kind of incrementally moving up. When I became the Minister of Education, one of the things that frustrated me beyond belief is that the school capital expenditure was being considered on a year-by-year basis, budget by budget. How much money did I get this year's budget? How many new schools can I build with that? Or how many new classrooms can I refurbish with that? So the first thing we did was move to a 4-year appropriation for school capital expenditure, so that you're actually thinking a little bit further ahead. And then we've informed how we spend that with a 10-year look forward. I think, like all of you do, we struggle to get beyond 10 years, because at that point it really starts to become crystal ball gazing when you're thinking about population trends, growth, and so on. And what we don't want to do is spend a whole lot of money in areas where we're not going to need it. I'd rather, we've got to get closer. So I think what we've managed to do, and I'm fairly confident in the next 4 or 5 years as a result of the planning we've done, that we'll get ahead of the growth curve rather than be just behind it, which is where we've been. But I think if we're aligning our planning a bit better and coordinating a bit better, we can draw on the insights that you have. So, where you're planning significant residential developments, for example, we can align that with health and education and other social service planning to make sure that the government infrastructure central government infrastructure that's going to have to support that is better lined up. So, look, I hear your frustration. I think it's one that central government ministers have as well. We're moving away from particularly that capital expenditure cycle being a one-yearly cycle to in many cases already a 4-year cycle, but then also informed by that longer-term planning, so that we're forecasting out as far as we can so that we can make better investment decisions.
Day. We would love a group photo, and I'd like Helen to make some remarks, but I'd love the Minister to have some lunch and more conversation over lunch. And we want you to know that we are close to our communities, and we've got the ability to do it now with those that are around us. I don't think it is about waiting for, planning cycles. I think we can get on with these things right now. And I've seen that will happening in our place. So Helen.
Thank you. Just very quickly in response to your comments, Gary, I can't steal the Minister of Local Government's thunder, but I'd say watch the space for the signalling that she will be giving. She is aware that the Local Government Act needs to be looked at in various guises, and in a couple of years' time it'll be 20 years old. Yeah. So she will be making some indications in due course about some of her thinking there. So don't give up. Take heart, yes.